Hello and welcome to Macynlleth 4mm. This is my 00 gauge layout of Macynlleth station in North Wales on the ex-Cambrian line from Welshpool to the Cambrian coast. It was originally built in 1863 by the Newton and Machynlleth Railway Company before being taken over by the Cambrian Railways a year later. It was amalgamated into the GWR in 1922. I've modelled the station in around 1938-1939 period, as it gives me the most scope in the variety of locos I can run, as the larger Manners and Moguls were starting to make an appearance around this time. Prior to this, the line was mostly run by smaller 060 and 440 locos. Like most of the Cambrian lines, it was single track but doubled through the station. The line ran from Welshpool in the east to Dovey Junction, where it split, with routes going north to Pwllheli via Barmouth and south to Aberystwyth. Trains would often be split or joined at Machynlleth. Trains would often be double-headed and banked up the steep gradients towards Welshpool. This, as well as goods yards on the up and down side and a good sized motor power depot, mean that there's lots of scope for operational interest. I've been planning the layout for around 10 years, but only started the build about 4 years ago. So you join me quite a way into the build and a lot of modelling has already been done. But this is the first time I've thought about making videos. There's still plenty to do and I hope to make more videos following future stages of the build. The layout is in a dedicated railway room. It's 23 by 12 foot outbuilding, which I first had to convert to make it suitable. This meant a new floor, insulated dry lining, new ceiling, new electric, new door, double glazed windows. I did all this work myself, and now it's a really comfortable place to work all year round. I started designing the track plan on Templot using GWR drawings from 1923. I've had to make a few compromises due to the space constraints. The lower yard has 4 sidings instead of 5, and there is some compression in both width and length. Templot would not let me build one of the double slips in the station throat as it was on too tight a curve, so that was replaced with a diamond crossing. This doesn't really affect the operation too much. Because of the width of the layout, I've not included the narrow gauge Corris Railway terminus in the lower yard. I then printed the plan out on around 120 sheets of A4 paper and sellotaped them together on the floor to check that it will all work, and this gave me the dimensions for the baseboards. The boards are of fairly conventional construction with softwood L girders and 9mm ply surface set at varying levels. Next I started building the track, and this was my first time I'd made my own point work and was a steep learning curve. 28 turnouts, 2 double slips and a diamond crossing using C&L components and C&L FlexiTrack. Once laid, it was all wired for DCC with a bus and droppers to every individual rail. This took about 6 months to the point where I could run my first train. The terrain I formed from leftover insulation board from the shed conversion. This was carved to shape and coated with plaster bandage. The imposing cliff face backdrop was carved from plaster. I painted the back scene, and I've spent about 18 months scratch building all the principal buildings, and only once they were in place I ballasted the track using blend woodland ceilings balance, and the ground cover in the yard area is made from using fine sand from a local beach and tile ground. This about brings us up to date, and I'll take you on a guided tour of the layout now. Right, so we're starting off travelling in a down direction from Welshpool, and we exit the Fiddle yard on the left there, come over, there's a lifting section here, small culvert with a little drainage dike coming through there. This is the end of the lifting section, and there's carriage storage sidings and the head shunt from the lower goods yard in the foreground, and the station throat point work is starting to appear here. The coaling stage from the motor powder depot, and we zoom in a bit on that. This is the water tower, and back out again, and the start of the cliff face. The cliff face extends the entire length of the station. It's cut into the hillside. Took quite a bit of time to get that right. The scenery hillside is formed from insulation sheets left over from the thermoboard when I insulated the room, and then that was coated in plaster of Paris, not the bandage, the plaster mixture, and then in sections as that starts to go off, you start jabbing into it with a chisel and carving out all the details of the rocks there. The advantage of that is it creates lots and lots of this stuff, which is little chippings as well, which are painted up with various washes and used as debris at the bottom of the cliff face. The cliff was, once it was dry, was then painted with the Woodland Scenics leopard spot technique of various different coloured washes dabbed onto it and built up to create this quite varied grey effect. So if we zoom a bit back out again, we've got in the foreground, we've got the line coming off to the lower goods yard, the grey ballasted two mainline tracks up and down, and in the background we're coming into the shed area. So if we have a little zoom in here, it's quite a long shed. It takes about 5 full length 4/6 locos if necessary, and this was constructed using a laser cutter. So I use a program called Lightburn to design the basic shell, which is then cut in 3mm MDF, and then I use the laser cutter to design various detail features, such as these brick arched windows. The laser cut has been absolutely fantastic, transformed my ability and the speed in which you can create bespoke windows, and also slates. I design and cut little strips of slate, and then they can be glued on individually, leaving no gaps. If you were using a plastic sheet, you'd have joints to try and disguise. in the foreground here. I'll turn it around because it's a beautiful little signal box, but all the detail of it is facing into the layout, and all we can see is the back. So that's the east signal box, if I can get it into focus. Needs an interior. That's a project to do down the line. So we're moving on down here. You can see the lower goods yard, moving off to the foreground of the layout down here, which is about a couple of inches below the level of the main line. And we can see the front and probably the more familiar view of the Loco shed and fitter's shed, with a concrete hard standing and the pits in front of it. This is the control panel. This is the Signatrack Ace. As you can see, we've got everything set up with a touch screen, so you can use all the functions for sound. Alongside that, I've got some paperwork there. So I've just built this out of a sheet of MDF and masked out and painted out the track plan, with the red lines being the main running lines and the black lines being all the sidings and Loco shed, etc. At the back there, we've got a test track, and that can be switched from DC to DCC. So I can program on that, or if I want to, I can switch to DC analog and run that with my old Gauge Master Model D. That's quite useful for if I'm building a Loco. I can run the chassis in on DC without fitting a chip on it. And also when it comes to it's fallen down the back there, cleaning wheels with one of these Gauge Master brushes, that's quite useful as well. You can just whack the Loco on full power. The points, I should say, are all run on DCC Concepts Cobalt motors on analog. I prefer having switches and a track plan to work my way through, rather than trying to remember what number point to change on a controller. And we've got some switches on either side which control the signals, which we'll probably have a little talk about later. So moving on, travelling down further towards the main station building. So this is the main goods shed, built in a similar way to the Loco shed. I should say, actually, I didn't mention it, that on top of once I've created the MDF shell of the building, to achieve this effect, I've used DAS modelling clay, which you roll out really thin, about 1 millimetre thick, actually using a pasta roller. That's the best way I've found now. And then once that's dry, just scribing in with the scribing tool all these stone details, and then various dry brushing techniques over the top to leave mortar lines underneath. The mortar lines are a bit bright on this at the moment. I think down the line we're going to do some weathering on that and tone it down a little bit. So zooming out again, we've got Cook and Manor there, one of the lovely Acra scale models, the sound fitted, waiting to depart for Welshpool. I've managed to do all the signals, although one of them I do need to remake, and we might do a video on that down the line. These are controlled with tiny servo units, and there's a servo control circuit board in the control panel to operate those. So if we move further down here, there's a number of small ancillary buildings in the upper goods yard, and the turntable. I should say a bit about the turntable. People who know Machynlleth or have seen pictures of it will probably be more familiar with the GWR 55-foot turntable, but that wasn't installed for a few years after this, the period that I'm actually modelling. And at this time there was a 50-foot Cowan Sheldon turntable, and this is a London Roads model. It's a lovely brass model and pit, which is absolutely perfect. It's exactly what was in the in the yard at the time, just before the war. Didn't really need any modifications. So moving into the platform area, the platforms are staggered. The up platform we see first, and then we're coming into the down platform. And as again you can see, there's a different level here. The up yard is, the height of a platform higher than the main running lines, and then you can see how much lower the lower yard is. More warehouses and ancillary items. The provender store was very prominent in a lot of the photos that I took, but I couldn't find any accurate or reliable photos of this area in the late 30s. So I built this using a couple of the ratio kits and kit bashed it and put it in, and it's a little bit compressed because the layout's a bit narrower than it should be, just for practical purposes. So I built this lovely building, and then only to find out later on that these provender stores weren't actually designed until after the war, so it's actually a bit out of place, but I like it, and it's now there. So and I don't know what to replace it with, so I think I'm probably going to leave it, even though it's a little bit out of period. So moving on now to the main station building. I'm just going to move this coach out of the way so you can get a good look at it. Fairly early on in the process, it was just after COVID lockdown, I managed to get up to Machynlleth and actually survey this great big station building, and take all the measurements of the windows, the doors, the gaps between them. So this is pretty much bang on accurate to scale, although this right hand end was a bit truncated because of length restrictions on what I had available. Again, all the windows and doors are laser cut, along with the barge boards up there and the decorative ridge tiles. There is some quite intricate ironwork supposed to be underneath the awning, which I still haven't decided how I'm going to do. I think probably the best way of doing it is to get them 3D printed but I shall have to teach myself how to design them first and find somebody who will print them for me. So zooming back out, over the back of the station building is a cattle dock area. Conveniently, it's actually very similar to design to the ratio model. So that's actually a kit bash from 2 ratio cattle dock kits. Back out over here. So as we see, the up platform comes to an end here, and then we've got the bridge, the overbridge, where the main road into Machynlleth travels underneath, an intricate girder and a lattice bridge. That was an interesting build, with varying different styles. As you can see, there's a different style of stonework closer to the bridge than on the abutments further away, and because the original bridge was smaller than this, and it was all rebuilt at one point, and that's a prominent thing that I noticed when I visited the site a few years ago. And we've got the road going up into the bottom of the lower yard. So we sweep round in a curve with the rest of the down platform, and it starts a signal with a little bit of area for some sort of nice countryside and green fields around the railway as we leave the station. The back scene, I should mention, I painted this myself, just using acrylics onto 3mm hardboard. I wouldn't call myself an artist. I'm quite pleased with it. I'm quite good at doing trees. I'm not so happy with the hills, look a little bit stark, but they and clouds look fantastic, and some distant mountains. So this is all fairly prototypical up until this point here, where we need to get ourselves into the Fiddle yard somehow. So we dive into a fictional tunnel. These are buildings that I rescued off my previous North Wales layout, and they fit nicely over there. So I'll try and show you some of the Fiddle yard. You're probably going to get a bit of glare from the window. So behind that we've got a 10 road Fiddle yard with a few little sidings at the end, storage sidings. This is all Pico code 75, just to make life simple. But we will have a running line in front of the Fiddle yard, and that's going to represent a little area of the line as it runs down the Dovey Valley. There's a little sort of single coach length halt and a permanent way building next to that, which will appear there eventually down the line. There's my laser cutter. Anybody that's interested, it's a Ken Tok tool. Does the job for me. It's a fairly entry level machine. So we're coming back round the rest of the Fiddle yard. You can probably see it there. So 10 really good length sidings, take full length trains. The platforms will take an 8 coach train. The Fiddle yard will take, to the longer sidings, will take probably 10 to 12 coach length. And then the line comes back round. It's going to dive under some more scenery yet to happen, and I've got a separate control panel to the Fiddle yard, which sits directly behind the main panel. So it's, if I put a stool in front of that, I can just turn around, select whatever we want for the fiddle yard, and there we are. We're back to where we started. So if we take a wander back up here, so the next job on my list of things to do is to sort out this area here. As you can see, a bare baseboard. So from the up platform, there's a footbridge that comes across in this area here. An up waiting room. It's a small wooden affair behind here, and that has got a big stone sort of foundation buttress sort of thing that it sits on there. And from the footbridge, there's a path that comes down behind the waiting shelter, and there's also a weighbridge building in front of that, all set into this embankment. And just to add a little bit of interest on the construction side of it, I've got 3 baseboard joints crossing this area as well. There's a baseboard joint here, and there's a baseboard joint here. So I should have mentioned, actually, this whole area of the lower yard is actually completely removable, so that I can access the back of the main boards much easier. And that's simply, we undo about, it's a lengthy a long screw here, and there's another one at the other end. The whole part of this board will slide in and out, supported on that, with just a pair of touch contacts at the other end to get power into the line. Okay, so I think that'll probably do for my first video. I need to get on and sort this area out. I'll probably build some mock-up buildings, and then I'll probably show you some of the techniques I use for making my buildings in the next video. Well, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.